My name is Kathy. The pronouns I use are she and her, and I will be co-animating this session with Max.
Yeah, and my pronouns are they or he.
So we'll go into the first page of the slide, and I just wanted to mention that we are volunteers with SILK, the Sexual Information Leads to Knowledge, which is a local community organization run by CAEO Quebec. And so we're volunteers, we're not professional counselors. So we are speaking from our own experiences, being part of the community, and offering advice. We'd also, tonight, we're going to share with you information about issues regarding the community and talk about what can be done to make the school a safer place for queer and trans students. Just to let you know, usually this is a presentation that we do for students directly in high schools. So maybe the terms will be more you'll see the presentation, the terms are geared more to students. However, we're going to, the information that we'll share will be just as useful for you and for your children also.
And we would like to do a land acknowledgement. We are grateful to, we are coming, Kathy and I are both coming from Montreal or Jojage, and we are grateful to provide these workshops in Jojage, which is stolen land that has been cared for by the people of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation for thousands of years. Part of our work is to educate about gender and sexuality, and it is important for us to highlight that the marginalization of Two-Spirit and Indigenous queer people started and continues because of colonialism, a system that negatively affects the lives of queer and trans communities. We encourage settlers to do their part to learn directly from resources produced by Indigenous groups and to contribute time, money, and other goods to local organizations providing services for the Indigenous populations living in Jojage. The Indigenous Ally Toolkit is a good place to start for learning. We hope that through our workshops, we can share our experiences and learn from one another so that we can work together to combat these systems in solidarity.
So some housekeeping before we dive into the topics. If you do have a webcam, we do encourage people to open their webcams if you feel like it. And we encourage people to participate and ask questions throughout the workshop, either verbally or through the chat. We'll try to respect the time, but also get the discussion going with everyone. Right now, I think we're a smaller group, so I think it'd be interesting if we can get everyone to participate and some discussions going. Feel free to ask during the presentation. And if you do want to share your preferred pronouns or your personal pronouns also, you can feel free to do so, like we did in the beginning. So the next few slides are about some resources that we have in Montreal. So Max is going to share that.
Yeah. So the first one that we're going to talk about a little bit is Project 10, which is near now near Sauve Metro in Ahuntsic in Montreal, and they offer services for LGBTQA plus youth. They can provide gender affirming gear, individual support, advocacy, and accompaniment. And they have Facebook, they're on Instagram, they have their own website, they're very active. Their support groups that they offer and other events. The next one is West Island LGBTQ2 Plus Center, which is similar to P10, but in the West Island. And again, this offers safer spaces for youth who are queer and trans, especially those living on the West Island. And they have social media and email. The next resource is Sext Ed, which is not its own like organization, but it is volunteer run. And what you do or what youth can do is they text in any questions related to sexuality, gender, or sexual health, regardless if they are 2SLGBTQIA plus or not. And they are guaranteed a well-researched response within 24 hours. All texts are confidential, anonymous, and free. And what's nice about this is that it comes up as a 514 number. So, something that a lot of times we'll tell students is that if they are feeling afraid of, oh, their parent will look down and see message from sex ed, it will come up as a 514 number. And they also have a website which has information as well. The next organization is Head and Hands, Aduman, and it's a local organization promoting physical and mental well-being of Montreal youth, and they offer medical, legal, and social services. And some more resources, Interlinia, which is a hotline for times of significant distress. Aztec, Trans-Pacific, could really use a lot of support right now, socially and financially. Center for Gender Advocacy, which is run out of Concordia. And I did see someone in the chat did mention Gender Creative Kids, and so that is that provides safer spaces and resources for families and individual youth and kids who are trans, non-binary, gender fluid, or gender non-conforming. There's also PFLAG, which is throughout Canada and the US, and it is for parents and friends of queer and trans children. There is Conseil Québécois LGBT, which provides resource documents about LGBTQIA 2+ inclusion. Some of them are only in French. And there's the LGBT plus Family Coalition, which is a community rights organization that advocates for the social and legal recognition of families that come under the umbrella of sexual and gender diversity. So that one, I guess like one way to think about it is Gender Creative Kids is more so families where the youth or kids themselves are LGBT or gender nonconforming, and LGBT plus Family Coalition is more so when parents are LGBT. And obviously there are families where both are the case. Right.
So we're going to create, even though this is a virtual space, we're going to create a virtual safe space where we can have our discussion tonight. So what are the different aspects or things that you think about when you want to create a safe space? Well, there are some different factors. I don't know if anyone wants to offer a few suggestions of what in their mind is, what factors are needed to create a safe space to have this discussion. Yes, Sylvie, you have your hand up.
Yes, I would say confidentiality.
Yes, definitely confidentiality, very, very important. For sure, Max and I, we're here because we want to share our story with you. And we're expecting that for other people who want to share their stories or their experiences, that we respect their confidentiality also. So not to share other people's personal stories outside of the space, that we know that this is a confidential and safe space to be able to share our stories. Anything else that we can think of to create a safe space? Well, just another thing that Sylvie did is that she raised her hand, so like respecting, if people, the order of people who want to speak, they're respecting. If people raise their hands, that we respect everyone's turn to speak. So that was another thing that you did indirectly, Sylvie. Thank you.
I see respect and open-mindedness,
Yes.
non-judgment.
Exactly. So those are different factors that we are expecting and hoping that everyone will be able to, project tonight, that we have open-mindedness to the topics that we're presenting, There are no wrong questions. However, you can ask any question. There are no dumb questions. It's just a matter of being respectful and open-minded to the discussion that we're going to be having tonight. Yes, Sylvie.
I'd say empathy also. To be
Yes.
empathetic to others, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Empathy goes with the open-mindedness. Definitely. So we're gonna just show Max, if you could click on the screen. So we had respecting everyone's participation and the presenters, don't judge others, avoid speaking over someone or interrupting them, protecting confidentiality, don't share personal information about other people, don't make rude or hateful comments or have inappropriate laughter. So we ask you not to disclose any personal information about yourself unless that you're okay with it being public knowledge. So if there is something that you do want to share, but without giving out any sort of personal information, what we suggest is using a water bottle example or any sort of inanimate object. So we can say, instead of naming someone's names or identifying someone, we can say, well, I know a water bottle is trying to come out to their parents, but they don't know how. What could water bottle do to have a talk with their parents about the topic? So by using an inanimate object like a water bottle or pencil or anything, you can still share your story, ask your questions, but without giving out any personal information about someone who didn't agree to share their personal situation here tonight.
I see a question or a statement from Rosemary.
Thank you. When you mentioned safer space, I thought maybe you were looking at a place in the school itself that would be a safe place for the students. So would you need a room that is specially assigned to you, or a room that is open in the school for you, for the students to be able to walk in? Are we
Well,
looking at something like that, or?
That's a really great question. And actually, we're going to be discussing safe spaces in schools later on in our discussion. So we're definitely going to be talking about that later on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And also some important definitions just to mention before we get started here. So the definition of, to make sure we're all on the same page, the definition of sex is a person's biology, like their genes, hormones or genitals, etc. So sex is generally defined as male, female, or intersex. And then we have the definition of gender. So gender is how a person's identity, who they are, how they express themselves, and how they act. So gender can be binary, either man or woman, or non-binary. So neither man or woman, or both man and woman, or something else that's self-defined. So a lot of times people do get gender and sex and sexual orientation sort of mixed between the three. So that's why we find it's important to mention this now. And sexuality, sexual orientation describes who someone is attracted to romantically and or sexually. So those are the three definitions, just to clear things up. And in the chat, I'm also going to put up a link of another reference for about safer space and definitions that you can consult later on.
So
yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Max.
right. So what we're going to do now is we're each going to share our personal stories about how we came to terms with our identities, what life is like for us, and feel free to ask questions after each of us presents. All right. So my name is, as I said earlier, my name is Max. My pronouns are they, them, or he, him, generally. And I am originally from Maryland in the United States. Growing up, I was lucky to have been in a community that was always very racially, socioeconomically diverse. I am biracial myself. My dad's white, my mom's black. My best friend growing up also had a white dad and a black mom. So, in terms of seeing different types of people, was very normal for me. But despite that, I wasn't really aware of gay, etc. people until a little bit solid, like more like closer to 8 or so, and was really surprised about this concept. And just for a little bit more context, I was always the weird kid. I was the tallest kid in class, had hair that stuck out everywhere, very artsy, very head in the clouds, had a very hard time socially, and definitely became was a target of a lot of things growing up. And so once I learned about, and I am assigned female at birth, grew up as a girl. And I knew, like, at a certain point that, okay, maybe in terms of not yet gender, but in terms of sexual orientation, I was kind of aware that at a certain point, getting to, like, puberty, middle school, like, uh-oh. And even though I grew up in a pretty progressive place, I was raised Unitarian, or more or less Unitarian, raised Unitarian. And, like, when we would have a moment of silence, I would pray, oh, please don't be gay, because in my mind, I already was different enough. I didn't need another thing. And I had this, thought in my mind of, oh, I'm going to come to my 10-year high school reunion and I'm going to, like, show all my bullies wrong. I'm going to have like, my hair is going to be permanently, like, straightened. I'll get rid of all my excess body hair and things like that, and have a nice boyfriend or husband. And that ended up not being what happened, and ultimately not what I needed. And I think what really helped me was being in a place later on, like, even though there, in undergrad and post grad, of people of different sexual orientations, of different gender identities. And there were some points in my life where I was seeing everything in very black and white and being very distressed. But once I learned, and this is my own personal journey, obviously everyone is different, trans people are different, people of different sexual orientations are different, but for me and how I see myself, what has been helpful is being in the fluid, living in a fluid space, spend having spent the majority of my life very much as, like, a quote unquote girly girl, and then spending a few years like, okay, I have to be a man now, a boy, like, and then kind of seeing that there were some parts where growing up I was overcompensating, but then some parts of that I really like and enjoy, this femininity, this out there-ness. And there were a few years where I kind of pushed that away, and over the past few years I've kind of reintroduced some of those elements, the more what's typically seen as feminine. But there are so many different ways. I think something that me and a few other presenters at Silk sometimes say is that when people ask the question, how many genders are there? It's as many genders as there are people, in a way, because every individual's sense of self is different. And again, for me, in terms of how I see myself, in terms of where I feel comfortable, where I fit in, it is the other and the in between in a lot of ways. And that's when I'm in that gray space that I feel the most at peace, and when I'm able to mentally be in that space. And yes, I came to Montreal a little over 5 years ago and have really, felt like part of a community here that, even though that does exist in Maryland, I think in Montreal it's to a next level, and that's where I am today. Any questions?
Okay, well, feel free to ask any questions later on after our story. Oh, there's something in the chat. Thank you for sharing your story, Max. So my story is I am a Canadian, Quebec, cisgendered woman. My parents immigrated to Canada from China. I was born and raised in Quebec City. And so during my childhood, I have three older sisters. And during my childhood, I experienced racism because of my Chinese origins. And I didn't know anything about being gay or the queer community in my youth because there wasn't really any role models. It wasn't something that was really talked about when I was younger. Just to give you a hint, I'm in my mid-40s now, so it was a while back. And the few glimpses of that I got of my parents' views about homosexuality and gay people were not very positive. In sort of the mentality of my parents, it was either a mental health issue, or gay people got AIDS, or gay people got gay bashed. So of course, it wasn't anything that they wanted for their children. And of course, within Chinese culture, honor and the family name is very important. So also that was something that influenced my decision to not come out for a long time. Well, for me, a long time. I kind of suspected in high school, when all your friends start gushing over the sports jocks or the cute guys at school, and I could find any sort of reason to sort of put them down, like, oh, he's too tall and he's kind of dumb and I don't like his hair. And whereas it was my defense mechanism to protect myself and saying, well, it's not because I'm gay, I like women. I was making up excuses to say like why I didn't like those guys. And then so I didn't, and with my parents, they didn't put pressure about dating either. In my family, education is very important. So they said, focus on your education, get a university degree, get a good job, and then later you'll, find the right Chinese husband, get married and have kids, which was pretty much supposed to be the game plan for myself and my three older sisters, which none of us followed, surprisingly. And so when I finally came into my early 20s and, started dating, I dated one guy, it lasted for 4 months. And even though I knew I was 95% gay and into women, I had to prove to myself and also have that sort of experience to say, well, I went out with this guy, he's a great guy, but I didn't love him that way. Because I knew that was an argument that my parents would come back say to me like, oh, you never dated a guy you don't know, maybe you just didn't meet the right guy. So I did date this one guy. And then I met a woman and I fell in love with her, and we dated secretly for about a year. And then we decided to move in together. And when that happened, well, I obviously had to tell my parents, and they didn't really understand like why all of a sudden I was moving in with someone when I had my own apartment that they were completely paying for. They were paying for my tuition. So there was a real fear that they would cut me off financially as well as cut me off from the family had they found out that I was gay. But I couldn't live in hiding. And that's one of the things, the core values that my parents did teach me, is to be honest and to be proud of who I am. In their mind is to be proud of being a Chinese person, but also all aspects of who I am to be proud. So it was hard for me to do it, but when I came out to my parents, I told them that, it wasn't their fault. They didn't do anything wrong because my three older sisters are all straight, and I'm gay. It's just who I am. And my mother cried a lot, and my father said his words of encouragement were, "Don't worry, we'll find you a good doctor." But I told him I didn't need a doctor. I mean, this is who I am. This is who I didn't choose to be gay, but I choose to live an honest life and an authentic life, and I choose to be happy and accept myself for who I am. After my coming out, we didn't speak to each other for about 9 months, which was very, very hard because I'm very close with my parents and we talk to each other almost weekly before my coming out. So not talking to them for 9 months was very, very difficult for both of us. But again, I didn't push the matter. I didn't push the topic because I had many years to sort of introspect and discover this and come to terms with it myself. So I knew they needed time also for them to understand the coming out. It took a while and it took quite a few explanations and experiences and different things, but over the years they've come to terms. And one of the things that I realized for them was that they had to deal with a lot of grief in the sense that what they thought their expectation for my life sort of died when I said that I was gay, because they expected me to get married, to have a family, to have kids, etc. And in their mind, being gay, because they didn't know anything about gay people, they just thought like gay people got gay bash or they got AIDS and died. For them, it wasn't possible for me to have that kind of life. Whereas today, I'm happy to say that, I've been with my wife for 24 years. We got married in 2008, and we have a beautiful daughter who's 8 years old. And so we were able to have, a kid, and my parents have a grandchild, and they're very, very, accepting now. It took time, but with patience and with some understanding, they were able to change their ideas about different things. Like a lot of things, they were able to evolve with the times, and I'm very thankful for that. And for my own child, well, I'm grateful that there are a lot more references out there today than there was in my time, so that I can pull out children's books and talk about diversity and show my daughter through books and through, TV shows and animation that, she's not the only one with two moms. She's not the only one in a multiracial family, because the diversity does exist out there. And by teaching her that at a very young age, it makes her feel more secure about her identity and saying that she's not alone. There are other people like her out there. And so that definitely helps with her. And I'm very proud of her because she's not shy about telling people. When little kids, I remember, ask her like, "Oh, where's your dad?" And she's like, "Well, I don't have a dad. I have two moms." And she's very, very matter of fact about it. And that's how it is. That's how our family is. So that's my story. Feel free to ask any questions. Oh, it's in the chat. Thank you for sharing your story. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here to share your story too, Kathy. Merci. You're welcome. Very happy to do it so. So I guess we'll continue along with the presentation, but again, feel free to ask us questions either through the chat or, to raise your hand. I'm just going to share my screen. Sorry, Max, I'm having some issues with the presentation.
Okay. Yeah, if you want, I can share my screen again.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. Okay. So we are going to play a little game, the umbrella game we call this. And what we do is as time allows, we ask participants to guess each letter. So let's start over here. What does letter G stand for under this umbrella? What do we think?
Yeah, so in the chat we have
Yeah, it does stand for gay, yes. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, the Q up top is queer. So it is the queer umbrella. So we have gay. All right, L. Lesbian, yes. Yes, and so people might identify as gay if they like people who are the same gender as them. Um, women who like other women might consider themselves as a lesbian, and and I think and women might refer to themselves as gay. Some people might prefer gay because it's an adjective over lesbian. Some people really have pride in lesbian because it's a good word, and it's comes from Lesbos, the Isle of Lesbos. And B. Yeah, bi or bisexual. That is typically it's attraction. So I'll get to the end, but a little bit more of a definition, because there's a couple of letters that can be a little bit interchangeable. We'll see what I mean, but bisexual attraction to typically your own gender and people of a gender different than you. The next letter is T. Yeah, trans. Yeah, trans and non-binary, people who identify with a gender that does not automatically align with the sex assigned at birth. The next one is 2S. It's one term together, 2S. Yeah, two-spirit. Yeah. And so two-spirit is a term that is by and for indigenous people who are indigenous to what's we refer to as North America or Turtle Island. And the term itself belonged to a specific indigenous community, or it's a definition of a term that came from a specific indigenous community, but then in the early 90s became used as what could be an umbrella term for people of different sexual orientations and gender identities, and people who were of different sexual orientations and gender identities were usually very highly honored in these communities. Some indigenous people do not use the term two-spirit, partially because as I said, it's a direct definition of a term specific to a particular indigenous group, and that erases the unique identities throughout different cultures. Well, or feel that it doesn't necessarily encapsulate all the different cultures. And there's also the term indigiqueer. But yes, two-spirit and indigiqueer are terms that are both by and for indigenous people. Oh, sorry. Oh, I did show that accidentally. Anyone? Yes, intersex. Yes, I wonder how people knew that. But yeah, so intersex, having sexual characteristics that are beyond the binary of female or male. That could be somebody who was assigned female at birth, has a vulva, and has testes inside. It could be somebody who has chromosomes that are atypical, like XXY chromosomes. There are lots of different possibilities. And historically, there's been the issue of intersex babies having genital surgeries. Typically, if there is a baby and they see, oh, testicles and a penis, but also a vulva, often they'll remove the part of those organs, and the child will essentially be forced to live as a girl. And we now know that those practices are invasive. They do kind of force a child into a box which they might not even identify with. So we encourage that intersex babies get to grow up and then have autonomy over their own bodies as they get older. And I do also want to say that there are about as many intersex people in the world as there are redheads. So remember, the Q up here is queer. So we have another letter Q. Any ideas? I'm gonna give you a hint. It's what you're probably all doing right now, trying to figure this out. Yes, questioning, exactly. Yes, so it is okay to question your gender, your sexuality. It's not as, I think growing up, I had this idea that, oh, you have to question, you can only question your gender, sexual orientation up until you're about 14 or so years old. And once you get to be a teenager, that's it. And for some people, that is the case. For lots of people, that is the case, and that's great. But if you are, there are things that I'm still questioning even at nearly 31 years old, and that is fine. And I think, especially as we learn about new terms and new understandings of gender and sexuality, it can happen as well. The next letter is letter A. Yes, asexual. Typically, that means not experiencing sexual attraction. There are some asexual people who still want romantic partners. There are some asexual people who are aromantic and don't have interest in dating, or having romantic relationships, but still might cherish friendships. There are people who might only experience sexual attraction only once there's a very established bond between them and the other person or people. Yeah, and then people can have different romantic attractions as well. All right, letter P. Pansexual. Yeah. And as I said, I'm going to also come back to the term bisexual, because if these words and definitions mean different things to different people. In a dictionary definition, it would be bisexual is attraction to your gender and another. Pansexual is attraction regardless of gender. There are people who use the two interchangeably. For a while, when I was at a point in like late teens, early 20s, first hearing about people who are non-binary, it was like when I was an undergrad, you could not say bisexual. Bisexual was seen as like a dirty word, essentially, and like only pansexual, because historically bi meaning two would be man and woman. But I think over the past few years, it's sort of, we've acknowledged that bisexuality has always been inclusive across the gender spectrum. So in terms of what terms people use, it depends on the individual. And then plus is just to show that there are many, many, many other letters out there. And down here, we have a couple of other terms. So the A down here is for allies, and straight, heterosexual, cisgender, identifying with the sex you were assigned at birth. And it's important that these people are allies to the people under this umbrella. They're not part of the umbrella necessarily. They might be. I'll explain in just a second. But they're there to support and listen, but allies who are heterosexual, cisgender, they can be guests in a community, but they cannot speak for the community, essentially. And I think it's also important to remember that obviously there are lots of queer people who are cisgender, and I think it's also important to acknowledge things like cisgender queer people being accepting of transgender people, validating and validating transness, validating bisexuality. Those are all big. Validating asexuality. All right. Any questions? Right.
Just to mention, like I've been doing volunteering with the CAEO Quebec for many, many years, and this the queer umbrella has changed over time, and it will probably continue to change and evolve too. So don't be surprised that, you know, there might be new things that we'll learn later on, and other things that we'll have to you know, evolve about. So as I mentioned at the beginning, at this presentation, this is usually a presentation that we do towards students. So just to provoke a little bit of discussion about their school environment, some of the questions that we ask the students are, is it safe for trans and queer students at your school? Why or why not? What would happen if a queer or trans student came out at your school? And if you witnessed or experienced homo, queer, transphobia, what normally happens at your school? So depending on the different schools, we'd have, you know, different responses. Sometimes people will talk about how, you know, they'll hear things, but no one will really intervene. Or sometimes they'll say like there are a couple of a few queer students who are out, and like you know, people respect them because they're out and proud, and they're not you know, shy about who they are. So there can be various different situations that come up when we talk about this with different schools. Another thing we talk about is the different kinds of homo, queer, transphobic things that students may hear in the school. So there are things like gender-based bullying. When you hear phrases like "you throw like a girl" or "you look like a dude in those clothes." There's cis sexism, which is prejudice or discrimination against transgender people, because the cis sexism believes that there are only two genders, only biological or real men/women. Also, there's homophobia or sexual orientation-based bullying. So the phrase "that's so gay" or other jokes or slurs that can be heard in the hallways at the school. I mean, even though people don't have bad intentions, comments like these can be very hurtful, because it could lead to a person to believe that who they are is wrong, especially if they already have doubts about the way they express their gender. And it can also create self-loathing or doubt and repression of gender identity and expression. So even though students can be saying different things as jokes, maybe it's things that they heard from other people, or you know, in another environment, repeating these kind of phrases and words can make someone who's queer feel like they're not a good person, that they suck, and that their identity is bad. So we try to make students aware that even though it's not their intention to make someone else feel bad, it's important to stop associating a person's orientation to something that's negative. Because someone who is gay and queer, it takes a while for that person to accept to be who they are and to be okay with that. And it can take a long time before they accept that part of themselves and be proud of who they are. So if they start hearing negative associations, that's going to be even a longer process for them to be able to accept themselves. So we encourage students, we can, like, what can you do? Even though you think you're just one person, what can you do to help change the sort of environment or the school environment to, excuse me, encourage a positive and safer space? We can stop using certain languages, like saying that that's so gay as an insult or calling someone a fag. Don't comment on someone's gender or gender expression. It's important to, respect trans students' privacy and their right to self-definition and expression. And when it comes to sports, washrooms, or using their pronouns, instead of saying the phrase, that test was so gay, well, you didn't really, what does that mean, really? You really want to say that, that test was really hard. So just to say what you mean instead of using, these negative expressions. So another thing that we try to encourage students, we can also call the person out. So if they hear, other people in the hallways say something that wasn't cool, in the moment, they could also call out the person by saying, I don't get what you're trying to say. Can you explain it to me, to make the other person reflect on what they just said? Because a lot of times people just say it like as automatically without really reflecting on the meaning behind the phrases. So we can call the person out, and you can just tell them what they said is inappropriate, saying like, hey, that's not cool what you said. So that's important to, you can do that. There's also calling people in, where we can, instead of confronting the person publicly, we can talk to the person privately, to explain to them what they said, why it was hurtful, because they may not even realize it. So we can do that more in a private setting. And because if you just stand by and you don't say or do anything, it's like you're supporting or you approve of the action. So calling them in, it's more private. And like I said, maybe the person didn't have any bad intentions, but it can be sort of opening, for that person to realize like what they said wasn't right, because it could be hurtful for someone else who's listening. So other ways to be supportive without having to confront anyone. You can also talk to the person who was picked on afterwards, to encourage them and say like what happened wasn't cool. You can also talk to a supportive counselor at the school, teacher or staff member about it, or talk to a staff member in charge of the GSA at the local school, or ask a staff member to help start up a GSA. So speaking up can really make a big difference. Having allies, even if you don't identify as part of the queer community, having allies is really, really helpful and supportive for someone who is questioning, who's having trouble, with their identity, trying to discover who they are. So it is important. You may want to ask, like, what is a GSA? So a GSA is a gender and sexuality alliance, that sometimes can be started in a school. So it's a club where you can talk about different issues, such as heteronormativity and cis sexism, about using gender neutral language, about 2SLGBTQIA plus rights in other places in the world, to find out what's going on, how certain things are advancing in other places and how, unfortunately, they may not be advancing in other places in the world. How to be inclusive of students of different races and cultural backgrounds, and anything else you can think of. So this is like a safe space that we talked about at the beginning, where a safe space could be created at the school where students can go and have these open discussions. Also, other suggestions, people can start using more gender neutral language, like instead of saying hi people or hi everyone, instead of saying hi boys and girls, using the term partner instead of saying girlfriend or boyfriend, or when you're talking about someone and you don't know which gender that they go by, you can use they instead of she or he. So there are a lot of many different things that just small changes in language can make a really big difference. And you may not know it directly, but you can be affecting someone positively in an indirect way just by doing all these different things. So, are there any questions about what we just mentioned? We're pretty good on time. If anyone would like to, we could take a quick break so we can all stretch, use the washroom, get a drink, and then we'll use the rest of the time that's left to answer any more questions you may have.
We only have 5 more minutes, actually.
Okay.
I don't know if we'll take a break. I think maybe we'll just, if no one minds, if we could just open it up to questions, if that's what you want to do, or
Sure.
is that where we're at?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know that there was questions submitted from registration, but let's go ahead with who's here. Rosemary, you have your hand up. Go ahead. I'll let Max and Kathy jump in. I'll stop.
Can I go then, Danielle? Danielle? Is that okay? Thank you. You know, there have been like protests by parents about students choosing names and about schools not allowing students to choose their names. How do you feel about that? Like, how students who are elementary level, can they choose their gender names at that level, at that age?
I mean, I think that for a lot of kids, if they have a certain sense of, if they are self-aware and they, there's a phrase, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. And I think that it's important to respect that. And I think a conversation that comes up a lot when it comes to especially very young trans children is this idea of, oh, what if their parents make them go through this huge process, like physical process, and what if they regret it? But there's physical transition, and then there's social transition, and using a name other than the one that they were given at birth can be part, and using different pronouns, presenting themselves in a different way, that's part of social transition. And permanent changes, like children and young adolescents aren't able to do that yet, so it really is about respecting who the child is. It's not about forcing them to change bodies or anything like that. And I think that, I mean, if you think about it, a lot, there are cis people who go by names, like first names that are not the ones that are on their birth certificate as well. And I think that if that is able to be respected, then I think that the name of a trans child should be able to as well. And I know where it becomes a little bit of a slippery slope is like the concept of outing. Like if, for example, a family is not approving of their child being trans and the child wants to go by a different name, or if the parents are like beforehand, this is my child, this is the name that they use, and then there's discrimination from the school. So that's where it becomes this like hard, why inclusivity should be from families, it should be from schools. But I think what's most important is that whether that's at school, whether that's at home, ideally it's both, that the child does have a safe space to be able to express themselves in a way that's, not harming anyone. And those are my thoughts on that.
Well, I thank you for that, but I know like today, there's so many resources that are needed in a school that there might not be enough resources for these children to help them make a decision, or not to make the decision, but to help them if they wish to make a decision on, you know, telling them it's okay, and maybe speaking with their parents and that. But resources in our public schools, it's so little right now.
Yeah. And I think that, well, like organizations like Gender Creative Kids are sort of filling that gap, but I do also, in an ideal world, it would be the schools that would be guaranteed to be supportive environments for these children as well, and having resources that are, you know, peer reviewed by people like us at CAEO Quebec. And yeah, I will say that I feel like a lot of progress is made since compared to even when I was a child, but I also know that there was progress made, and then there are some things within the past couple of years that have almost made things like regressive, like there's more visibility, and so then people who are transphobic, queerphobic, like fight more, and so that's what is part of what's making it a kind of a scary world right now.
Thank you.
Sylvie?
Yes, I have a question because I'm a teacher in a school board, and I've seen parents bullying transgender kids in elementary schools, and it's been a big issue. And I personally give some workshops sometimes because I've been studying in that field and everything, and I don't know what's your view on this? Like, what do you do when a parent in a school starts outing your kid, you know? Because I've seen that happen, and and everything that was put in place by the school board is now in some school will be like destroyed because of that parent, because the parent is against the fact that his child goes in the same bathroom as the transgender kid, and and the parents is trying to get all the other parents on board, and they're trying to you know, I don't know what they're trying to do, but it's gone crazy in some schools, I'm telling you. And I've been trying to find ideas and stuff to do, but at some point it's like against like human rights, you know. Like, let that poor kid live. It's elementary, whatever level it is, it's the same thing. But I mean, you know, and then the families put like is ostracized, you know. So I find it really really sad and really hard to deal with. And like, usually I'm a solution finder, but there I don't know what to do. Like, I find it really sad. Do you have any idea on that, or?
Well, the way I see it is, I mean, if I strip it down to a very basic level, the parent is treating this child, no matter like what mean things they're saying, is because that they're different, you know. And how would, if it was for any other reason that they're different, whether it be like the color of their skin, or if they had a disability or anything else, like how would the school or anyone else react if the parent did the same thing to another kid who was different in another way? Like, I bring it down to that. And then unfortunately, if we see that, you know, the school isn't reacting, what I follow, unfortunately, like people don't get involved until it hits them personally. I mean, that's how people are wired, you know. Until it really hits you personally, you won't really get involved. And what I've been reading about with trans people and the backlash that's coming back from, you know, conservative groups, is that yes, they are mobilizing, and what they're doing is that they're putting themselves in places of power where they can make decisions that affect students. So parents are, you know, getting voted onto school boards and being part of like parent associations that make decisions, and like parents council meetings at the schools, and they're there and they're getting involved and they're making decisions that affect all of the students, but they have, you know, obviously a bias towards trans students. So knowing that, I mean, the counter would be, you know, get parents who are allies, get parents who are allies to the queer community, to get them involved, to get them into these, school boards and associations and parent associations, to get them into places where they can make decisions also that affect not only their own child, but other children in that school.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's a work in progress all the time, eh? But that's right. That's what we have to do. Thank you so much.